CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams reported from Raqqa, Syria in October 2017. She was the only network correspondent reporting on the ground. She witnessed the fall of the ISIS stronghold. In her reporter's notebook, she explains how Syrians suffered at the hands of the terror group.
One of the most important moments in Syria's civil war, both strategically key and symbolic, came when ISIS was driven out of the city of Raqqa in October 2017. And we were there with a front seat on history to witness the closing days of that crucial battle. Raqqa had served as the ISIS de facto capital for over 3 years, and the extremists had turned it into what they claimed was some kind of Islamic paradise, but was in reality a killing field, a theatre for their barbaric acts of violence, whether it was public beheadings, throwing gay men from rooftops to their deaths, or holding women as sex slaves. But after months of gruelling battle, Raqqa was recaptured by American-backed fighters, ironically, many of them women. We were in and out of Raqqa and the surrounding areas throughout 2017. We ventured into Raqqa on foot when those US-backed fighters began retaking the outskirts. Some of our team members were actually shot at by ISIS snipers. And then we were there for the last 2 weeks of the battle. Finally, on the 17th of October, we were able to walk into Al Naim Circle, the symbolic heart of Raqqa, where ISIS had carried out so many of its public executions. The battle for Raqqa was really the key victory over ISIS, a turning point, because it showed that the so-called Islamic State was crumbling and that its collapse as a territorial entity was inevitable. But it also showed just how complicated the Syrian war had become, because the US-backed fighters who retook Raqqa are viewed by neighbouring Turkey as terrorists. And Turkey is a key US ally and a member of NATO. Just think about that for a second. In order to defeat a terrorist group, the US partnered up with the most capable fighting force on the ground in eastern Syria, ready and willing to take on ISIS. But in doing so, the US infuriated one of its key allies here in the Middle East, Turkey, which said, in effect, this is dangerous. To defeat ISIS, you've partnered up with people who we regard as terrorists. That gives you a sense of just how complicated and messy the Syrian conflict has become, with Iran and Russia supporting the Syrian regime, and the US and other countries supporting opposition groups, and then terrorist groups capitalising on the chaos. But for me, the most important reporting we do in Syria is less about geopolitics than it is about the utter inhumanity of this war. One of the most disturbing stories I think we reported on was a psychiatric hospital in the town of Azaz, one of only 3 psychiatric hospitals left in Syria. The others have been forced to close by the war. The hospital has been bombarded 4 times. Many of its patients suffer from chronic schizophrenia, and their symptoms have been exacerbated by their experience of the conflict, and the hospital struggles to get the medicine it needs to treat its patients. In this war, it is the poor, the sick, the vulnerable and the dispossessed who have often suffered the most. They are rarely the ones making the decisions. They are rarely the ones who are perpetuating the violence, but they have lost their livelihoods and, in many cases, their lives.
Today, civilians are slowly returning to Raqqa. The city's civil council says that it's focusing on rebuilding key infrastructure and providing services to people who are making their way back home. Since the city was liberated, 317 schools have been constructed.